Good afternoon, Tuesday, January 21st, 2022, and I will reconvene the Board of County Commissioners regular board meeting. Good afternoon. We are all present for the meeting, and we have a fairly robust agenda this afternoon that's going to take us to the time limits. So we'll begin directly with a second reading and public hearing on Ordinance 22-01 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 9 to improve enforcement of laws and regulations that govern the retail sale of tobacco products and inhalant delivery systems, PM and NBA 111-2022. And Mr. Moskrahayski, once I begin the protocol, I'll turn it over to you for the introduction of the panel. So Ordinance 22-01, this is a public hearing on January 25th, 2022. The order of proceedings for this hearing will be first a report by staff, which will be followed by public testimony and then additional comments by staff. Participants are encouraged to raise issues or concerns with sufficient specificity to enable the county to address or respond to them prior to the board's deliberations. Now, the testimony today on Ordinance 22-01 will be strictly taken regarding Ordinance 22-01. Time for general public testimony is typically the start of our meetings, usually around 9 o'clock on Tuesday mornings of regular board meeting days. At this point, board, I will call for disclosure of board commissioner abstentions due to conflicts of interest or biases. I will not call by name, just sound off if you have such. I hear none. Ms. Moskrahayski, would you sooner I call them by name?
I'm sorry, Chair.
Would you sooner I call them by name for the abstentions, or is my method okay?
I think that works. That's typically how we've done it, is ask for commissioners to disclose if they have any. If you don't hear any, then okay. We don't have.
Very good. Then that's where I'll not ask you that question again until December 31st. Then I'll call for any challenges to the board's qualifications to hear the matter. Ms. Jones, do you see any signals of challenges? Seeing, hearing none. Then Mr. Moskrahayski will hear the report by staff, and I'll turn it over to you to introduce the staff for Ordinance 22-01.
Thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure to introduce Eve Gray, our new Director of Health and Human Services, as well as two individuals you know well, Dr. Jocelyn Warren, our Public Health Manager, and Dr. Elizabeth Maxwell, our Prevention Section Supervisor. So I'll turn it over to that team to walk you through this item.
Ms. Moskrahayski, I'll say I'm beginning to know Ms. Gray very well. I have multiple contacts in the first week on the job, so thank you.
Right, I think I'm up first, unless Eve or Dr. Warren wants to say anything.
Well, thank you, Chair Farr and Vice Chair Trigger. We're happy to be here. I am going to be running the slideshow, so that is my official capacity today. Dr. Maxwell is the expert in this area, so I will turn it over to her and hope that this works.
Thank you, Dr. Warren.
And you can hear me okay?
Perfectly, thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, we will get going. So I'll wait till I can see. There we go. You can move ahead, Jocelyn.
Okay. Sorry, just a second.
Okay. So good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing this. The motion being considered is, as Chair Farr said, second reading and public hearing of Ordinance number 22-01 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 9 to improve enforcement of laws and regulations that govern the retail sale of tobacco products and inhalant delivery systems. Next slide, please. The agenda item summary is changes to the Lane Code Chapter 9 are being recommended based upon the passage of Senate Bill 587. Next slide, please. So just some information about Senate Bill 587, and this is kind of a reminder, we've come in front of you before, but it didn't pass this year. This slide is from the last time it passed last year. And requires Department of Revenue to issue licenses to qualified tobacco retailers. DOR issued licenses starting December 1st with implementation January 1st. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Most entities have not been able to be in compliance with that because it was a tight turnaround. OHA requires under this law a yearly compliance inspection, yearly minimum legal sales age inspection, and to create a mechanism for complaints, and to create a plan for remediation when violations occur. And just a little bit of background, Lane County paved the way for Senate Bill 587 by passing our own TRL in 2015 and then bringing on other cities in Lane County. This is a local victory in what often feels like a never-ending battle for the health of everyone in our community, and most especially the health of our youth and our BIPOC communities who've been targeted by the tobacco industry. However, we now have an opportunity to utilize Senate Bill 587 to create one clear, consistent TRL infrastructure. Senate Bill 587 will provide annual enforcement of the license and minimum legal sales age inspections, which are incredibly important in ensuring that youth and other communities are kept safe from tobacco products. So just a little bit about Lane County TRL. Board of Health passed it in 2015. In 2016, the city of Veneta signed an IGA to sign on for that and have Lane County administer their licenses. And in 2018, Creswell did the same thing. One notable difference between, oh, sorry, Jocelyn, yeah, thanks. One notable thing is that the Lane County TRL does have a 1,000-foot buffer between retailers and a school, and DOR and OHA have been very easy about that. And so we're allowed to keep that, and they will help us keep that enforcement of that. So that's a really good thing. Next slide. So just a reminder about other TRLs in Lane County. We have Eugene, Springfield, Cottage Grove, Oak Ridge, and then as I said, Creswell and Veneta signed on to IGAs with the county. And Junction City and Florence didn't have TRLs, and so they will automatically go under the Senate bill and be administered by the state. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits of a state-administered TRL is we have an opportunity to have one clear, consistent TRL infrastructure. We've got the yearly minimum legal sales age inspections, which we have not been able to do in Lane County, a mechanism for complaints, a mechanism for remediation of violations. However, a really good thing is that Senate Bill 587 does allow local jurisdictions to pass future restrictions. So some of you may be aware of some of the things that have happened in other parts of the state with flavor bans and price discount bans, and we could get even more creative in the future. So that's all allowed, so that's good. And as was the House, sorry, Jocelyn, can you back up? Thank you. As was the case when Lane County passed Tobacco 21 prior to the passage of the state law, Lane County enacted its own TRL prior to the state. The hard work of local governments in Oregon, such as ours, who were early adopters of TRL, paved the way for the state law. And now, next one. Considerations for this is that counties and cities don't have to sign on. We're not compelled to do that. However, if we decided not to, if we wanted to keep our own TRL, we do have to enforce up to the state standard. And so that would include yearly minimum legal sales age inspections, which we have never done, a mechanism for complaints, a mechanism for remediation of violations. And just a little bit of background, Lane County's fees have always been too low to allow for a robust program that would provide those minimum legal sales age inspections, the assessment of violations, and to investigate complaints. And as an example, a county with a really robust program can cost up to $500,000 a year because we would have to add additional staff FTE for enforcement. We'd have to add supervision time. We'd have to add FTE for communications so that the retailers could be educated and so the materials could go out. We would have to add funding for those decoys, the youth decoys, so that we could do those minimum legal sales age inspections. Some programs have utilized a VISTA volunteer to coordinate all that. Some programs also have purchased a car that is totally just for using for those inspections. Some have had to purchase their own licensing fee software. And there's the printing of the education materials, quarterly retail trainings, gas, cash for decoys to buy the products. So a robust program has a lot of components to it and it can be fairly pricey. Next slide. And so just as a reminder, other Lane County cities and TRL. So DOR and OHA and Lane County Public Health have been communicating with the other cities to see what they want to do. And so Veneta, Creswell, Oak Ridge, Florence, and Junction City have already decided they're going to go under Senate Bill 587. And part of the issue, the same as what we've had, is that the timeline was so tight that Eugene, Springfield, and Cottage Grove could not get their city councils together in time to hear this. So the latest that I've heard from my contacts with the cities and with DOR and OHA is that it's likely that the other cities that are undecided currently will sign on for Senate Bill 587, and it's looking pretty likely that by the end of 2022, the entire county will be under Senate Bill 587. Next slide. And so just this does align with priority one, the promotion of a safe and healthy county. And so next slide. The recommendation is the Office of County Counsel and the Department of Health and Human Services support these revisions and the adoption of Ordinance 22-01. Next slide. And the timing and implementation, and much of this is already, some of the groundwork has been laid. The ordinance will become effective 30 days after it has been enacted, and Lane County Public Health with the Environmental Health Department and Prevention, we've already started communicating with the retailers to let them know about the possibilities that could be happening. And I think that is it for the presentation portion, and we are happy to move to the next part.
Thank you, Dr. Maxwell, for the presentation. And Dr. Warren, I believe you're probably the most highly certificated slideshow presenter that we've ever had. Thank you. Next we will, before I encourage discussion among the board and before we consider the ordinance, we'll listen to we'll hear public testimony. Ms. Jones, do you have an approximate number of participants in public testimony for 22-01?
Thank you, Chair Farr. I do not. At this point, I will need to ask. I do have attendees, but let me ask. At this time, if you have signed up to give testimony on ordinance number 2201, would you please raise your virtual hand and I will call on you to give testimony. Chair Farr, I do have about 5 people out there, but they are not raising their hands for 2201, so I will return the meeting to you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And should anybody raise their hand as we move forward in the next few moments, they will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. I'll give it a moment to see if any hands raise. Then I'll turn to staff. Any additional comments?
Chair Farr and Vice Chair Trigger, thank you for having us here. This is as you know, the second reading. We have made the recommendation to accept the state's implementation and enforcement of this tobacco retail license. And as Dr. Maxwell mentioned, it is a win. We are really encouraged that tobacco prevention is very much being supported by statewide implementation of tobacco retail licensing. It has long been something that we have advocated for. So we are very pleased to see that. There have been some interesting conversations at the state level about the fees and how they were set and the need to be able to enforce these rules, because without adequate enforcement, they really don't have any effect. So that has been a difficult thing, I think, at the state level to determine, and they did go with the legislature a fee-for-service model for this work. One thing I think that is not ideal from a public health perspective, a fee-for-service model to fund public health services, I don't think is ideal when something like tobacco prevention is foundational. I am hopeful in the years to come that the local health departments and the state can work together to find some kind of funding mechanism that is more equitable and that allows a robust tobacco prevention program in every county to be able to do the education, especially the education. I think the enforcement is important, but I think the education and working with retailers is really critical. And we want everyone to understand the importance of a tobacco retail license and what the goals are, and preventing youth use and why that is so important. And I'm hopeful that in the future we can get to a different model where we can also make more robust our own kind of tobacco prevention capacity here in Lane County. But I think for the time being, this is a step in the right direction. It's not everything we were hoping for, but we are hopeful about the future and our tobacco prevention efforts. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Warren. I think that you and I began our journey together on this at about the same time, about close to 10 years ago now, I think. And here we are today moving forward. Board, we still have the public hearing is still open. And Ms. Jones, I'll ask, has anyone raised their hands before I entertain a motion to close the hearing?
No, they have
Seeing none.
not, Chair Farr. Thank you.
Seeing none, I'll move forward, and I will not entertain a motion, but barring objection at the sound of the gavel, I will close the public hearing. Seeing no objection, the hearing is closed. And now I will encourage the board to enter into discussion on Ordinance 22-01. And I'm moving to the queue to see if I have any raised hands. Moving up, we have Vice Chair Trigger, followed by Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Drs. Maxwell and Warren, and thanks for being with us, Ms. Gray. I'm really excited about this for a number of reasons. I'm excited to have a state bill coming before us that doesn't preempt local governments from doing better. So often in public health, that's something we have to trade away to get an improved policy from where we are, but not the best policy that we know we can do by our communities. So I really appreciate them setting a floor and not a ceiling for us on this. Particularly, for example, being able to maintain that buffer, because that is about youth initiation into tobacco addiction or nicotine addiction, really. You know, the whole reason we passed Tobacco 21 here is because we really value youth health. And I think there's even more we could do. I'd like to see us, when public health isn't so swamped addressing COVID and we can get staffed back up again in our tobacco prevention, that we start looking at some of those even bolder policies like Washington County's done around flavor product bans and so on, because we know those are specifically intended to addict young folks. We know that tobacco companies spend more than, well, maybe some of you didn't know, they spend more than $1 million an hour advertising and marketing their products. So we have a huge industry to go against, trying to keep themselves in business by addicting young people to nicotine. So these nicotine delivery systems that they've gotten really clever with all the vapes and so on, it's really important. And I know that tobacco initiation or nicotine use initiation is among young people, that if you can, Surgeon General website shows us that 3 out of 4 teen smokers do become adult smokers, and they're more susceptible to nicotine addiction. And that among those who persist in smoking, 1/3 of them will prematurely die from tobacco-related causes, and that 9 out of 10 smokers do start by the age of 18. So if we can get people to the age of 26, again, from the US Surgeon General, 99% of people who are smokers after it started before the age of 26. So anything we can do to keep certain products away and ensure that retailers are only selling to people who are of legal age to buy the product. So I love that this is really focused on the minimum legal age. I also understand we had 301 violations of selling to minors in Lane County. And so clearly we need this. And I did note, I think it was Commissioner Bozievich brought up someone in his district who sells tobacco, who commented that this was a real lift for them to increase from the current $200 to the $953. But that $753 difference with a carton of cigarettes costing on average $55, that means they need to sell about 1 more carton a month to cover the difference in the licensure. So it's an eye-popping number when you just put the number up there of what the license is, but when you break it down like that for a retailer, I think it's I think we get what we really need to put more resources into these tobacco prevention programs, particularly those that will help keep youth from becoming addicted to nicotine. So thank you for your work, and looking forward to doing even better by youth in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trigger. Next up on the queue is Commissioner Bozievich. And I'll mention, I think cartons of cigs I think packs are about $10 a piece now. So cartons may be a little higher than that yet even today. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. There's a lot of cost that goes into that carton of cigarettes for the store. So it takes a lot more than 1 per month to make up that difference. Just saying, between the taxes, federal taxes and everything else that are in that, and the cost to the wholesaler, rent, electricity and all for the store.
Yeah.
That said, I think staff's presentation covers why there's that difference now. State law now, we can opt out of being part of this, but we have to still do everything the state laws requiring as far as the annual inspection, age of sale inspections, enforcement, complaint system. We'd have to raise our fees from 200 to something probably pretty close to the 935 or whatever it is anyway, to cover the cost of those additional requirements under this law. So I don't have as much heartburn understanding, we're not mandated to be part of the state system.
I have lost your audio, Commissioner Bozievich. Am I alone in losing the audio, or that's universal? Commissioner Bozievich, if you can hear, you may wish to sign out and sign back in. And once you sign back in, I'll come back to you on the queue immediately. One more chance, Commissioner Bozievich. Then Commissioner Bozievich, I'm moving along to next in the queue, which is Commissioner Buck.
But
Commissioner Bozievich, we are losing your audio, but you have the, Commissioner Buck, Commissioner Bozievich has the floor. But we have lost you. We'll move along. Commissioner Buck, followed by Commissioner Burney, unless Commissioner Bozievich returns.
It looks like we have his screen back, so I'll pause so he can finish.
Say something, Commissioner Bozievich. So
is my audio back up?
Yeah.
You are back on. So Commissioner Buck, with your indulgence, back to you, Commissioner Bozievich.
Yeah, you froze Chair Farr, and then after a while, the whole thing blinked out and I had to re-sign in. So I'm not quite sure where I got stopped, but I basically was trying to say I'm okay now with joining the state program because I realized we'd have to raise our fees to meet the state law anyway. And I do kind of want to note that we could have had money for tobacco prevention in the tobacco settlement of that huge lawsuit where multi-millions of dollars came to the state, but the state diverted that for other uses, which is one of the reasons why we fought so hard to have the opioid settlement come directly to local governments so that we can make sure it gets spent on what it was meant for. So I appreciate your concerns about funding for tobacco prevention. I only wish that the settlement dollars had been used wisely.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. Commissioner Buck, followed by Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my support for this. I have a little one, and I wonder when will be the first time somebody tries to offer her a cigarette or other tobacco products. I know it's coming. It will probably happen to a majority of our children. And it's up to me as a mom, to ensure that I educate her about all the downfalls that come with it. But it's a concern for a lot of parents out there. And I think this is a good thing. We're moving in the right direction. I do also feel like we could have further conversations regarding flavor bans and other items associated with tobacco use and targeting for our children. So maybe in the future, we'll hear back from you on those particular items. In the meantime, I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Burney, you will be followed by me.
The caboose. Huh? First, I want to thank Ms. Gray for being so verbose today. I'm just kidding you. You've done a couple of our agenda items, but you haven't said much. But as with Commissioner Farr, it's delightful to have met you and talked with you and getting to know you. Yeah, I join my fellow commissioners in supporting this for the different reasons they mentioned. Two quick comments. One is that Maddie and I together have 6 little ones, but our little ones are about 6 feet tall. But they have little ones, and so we are no less concerned with all of this. And just very quickly, because really the bottom line is I get what's going on. I think Commissioners Buck and Bozovich each identify different pieces of the puzzle. If anyone would have told me when I was in high school, when cigarettes were plentiful and legal, and we were forced to watch a movie called Reefer Madness, which explained to us that marijuana was the gateway to all sorts of evil and sinful activities, I would have bet everything I could that I'd never be in a position where marijuana is legal. And what we are discussing is how we control the negative effects of tobacco. I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm just making a comment that it's interesting how things change, but I absolutely support what staff is proposing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Any further commissioner hands? Commissioner Buck, is that an echo of a hand I see raised, or would you wish to go into the queue for the second time? Okay, it's down. Then I will put myself in the queue and just say this. First off, Commissioner Burney, I'm envious. I had to pay to see Reefer Madness at the Urban Memorial Unit of the U of O in 1973, and it cost like 50 cents, which I didn't have.
Sadly, that probably means I'm a little older.
So, and then to you, Dr. Warren, I talked about how long you and I have been shoulder to shoulder on this issue, always in lockstep. You always leading me and helping give me the words to say. Not much for me to say beyond what we've talked about for the last 10 years, other than I'll harken back a little bit further to June 17th, 1972, outside the Memorial Coliseum where Led Zeppelin was playing that night. I was out there and I was a teenager, recent graduate from high school, and I was offered a couple of packs of free cigs, which I didn't accept because I did not withstand that. I withstood the temptation to start smoking when I was a teenager. I never did smoke. That being said, I have a friend who did accept the cigs, started smoking as a teenager. And today that friend is highly educated, highly regarded, highly effective in their work. And their main regret in life is taking those cigs and beginning smoking as a teenager. We're doing the right thing here. So we'll move forward with the discussion. To the staff or to the board, anything further? Then I do believe we're in a position where I can entertain a motion.
Chair Farr, I'll move adoption of Ordinance 22-01 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 9 to improve enforcement of laws, regulations that govern the retail sales of tobacco products and inhalant delivery systems.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich. Discussion to the motion. I see no further discussion. Mr. Mokraski, this is an ordinance. Will you call roll?
Yes, Chair, and I'll just clarify that typically how we do the roll is we start with the newest commissioner and then work our way up, and the chair is always the last to vote. So that's our protocol and the reason that we do it that way. Commissioner Trieger.
Trieger votes yes.
Commissioner Burney.
Yes.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Bozovich.
Yes.
And Commissioner Farr.
Aye. Thank you. Mr. Mokrasi, the motion passes 5-0, all present voting in the affirmative. Good work bringing us to this point, Dr. Warren, Dr. Maxwell, Ms. Gray, congratulations and bravo.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then we'll move along the agenda to Order 22-01-25-04. And I'm going to take a second to bring up my script. So bear with me just one
Chair
moment.
Farr,
Yes.
Chair Farr, if I could interrupt, if that's actually the order, you are on Ordinance 22-02 at this time.
I did say 02. Thank you very much. I did say 01 mistakenly. Thank you. Then we have before us Ordinance number 22-02 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapters 2, 5, 6, and 9 to modernize and update general organization functions, procedures, and processes, and adopting a severability clause. Today, we'll be holding a public hearing. This is a public hearing on January 25th, 2022. The order of the proceedings for the hearing will once again be first report by staff, followed by public testimony, if any, and then additional comments by staff. I would encourage participants to raise issues or concerns with sufficient specificity, excuse me, I can't even blame my accent for that one, all right? Sorry. To enable the county to address or respond to them prior to the board's deliberations. At this time, I will call for disclosure of the board commissioners for abstentions due to conflicts of interest or biases. I see here none. Then I will call for any challenges for the board's qualifications to hear the matter. I see none. Ms. Jones, do you see any in the audience? Seeing, hearing none, thank you, Ms. Jones. Seeing none, we'll move forward to hearing the report by the staff. Mr. Mokrahajski, I will turn it over to you to introduce your panel.
And I believe that Lindsay Eichner, Principal Planner, Land Management, is going to handle this one. Lindsay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, FAR, and Commissioners. Today, we have an expert panel available before you, but the majority of the presentation is going to be prepared or presented by Ann Davies, who is a consultant we've hired through LCOG, and Moria Papagallo, who is our County Water Resources Coordinator, will also do some sharing of information. Also available, though, for questions are myself, and we have Cheryl Lockhart, who's our Coordinated Services Supervisor, and then we have two of our compliance officers, Jane Burgess and Amber Watson, for any follow-up questions that you may have. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to Ann.
Good afternoon, Chair Farr and Board of Commissioners. This afternoon, I am tasked with trying to figure out how detailed or how broad to make this presentation. I've opted for the higher level for the presentation before the public hearing, and then hoping that we can drill down into some details if you have further questions after the hearing. Again, my name is Ann Davies. I am an attorney with the Lane Council of Governments, although I'm not acting as an attorney in my presentation today. You have, I think, at least two county councils available to answer any legal questions. I was hired basically as a planning staff to help draft this code. So for your, just reminding you how this came about a couple of years ago, the board directed staff to make an attempt to revise Lane Code Chapter 5, which are the enforcement provisions, the procedural provisions that allow the county to enforce the rest of the Lane Code. So the idea was to streamline those procedures, make them clearer, and also make it easier for the county to enforce against what are commonly known as nuisance properties. That's just one piece of the whole goal of these revisions. The project began as a revision of Chapter 5, and then it kind of grew or exploded depending on your point of view. So what we did is we took Chapter 5 and we took pieces from Chapter 5 and we put them in different chapters of the code. And I'll kind of try to explain how that kind of evolved in a little bit. At the same time that the county was doing their Chapter 5 revisions, Moria Papagallo was tasked with adopting changes to the illicit discharge provisions, coming from a different avenue, which was the NPDES permit got updated and had some different requirements. So that part of the code rewrite got mushed in with the Chapter 5 revisions. We worked really hard to put those together, and it was interesting to see how they all played off of each other, and it came out with these different packets of information that we have. And I'm going to turn it over just briefly. Moria has a brief presentation just about the illicit discharge piece. And I am supposed to be sharing this, so I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get you her PowerPoint. Let's see.
Success.
Okay, we got it?
Yes.
I'm going to give you the big screen here. There you go. Okay, is that good, Moria?
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Ann.
Yep.
I just wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about some of the regulations, why we need to change the illicit discharge code. The county has a variety of water quality related permits that we're required to have by EPA and DEQ as the administrator of both the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. At that level, we are required to have a portion of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System for municipal separate storm sewer systems, the MS4 permit. Then there's the Water Pollution Control Facility permit for underground injection controls. That's dry wells, which those are used in really our flat areas like around Eugene and Springfield, where it's easier to gather stormwater off of the road system and provide for that safety by just getting it right into the ground and infiltrating it. And then there's also the total maximum daily load for the Willamette River, which is required because the Willamette River is considered to be water quality limited by the state. And all of these permits require that we have an illicit discharge detection and elimination program. We have had illicit discharge code since the early 2000s, but we recently got a new MS4 permit, which I've presented to the board about in the past in 2019, that required some updates to our illicit discharge code associated with escalating enforcement procedures, and then also took the opportunity to adjust some definitions and create some more efficiencies in the code there. Next slide. Really quick, what are illicit discharges? This is basically any discharge to our storm system that's not composed entirely of stormwater or precipitation, basically. And since we have a large road network and our storm system connects directly to rivers and streams without any type of treatment, illicit discharge detection is pretty important to help us keep our discharges clean. There's a lot of potential indirect discharges, paints, motor oil, that kind of thing. Also construction site runoff and mud are all things that can travel through our stormwater system into rivers and streams. One more slide, please. And then really, this is all super important just to help protect human health and safety, wildlife and their habitats throughout our county, and then recreation and tourism is a big component of our wildlife and natural spaces. So back to you, Ann.
Okay, thanks, Moria. So I'm going to now try to share this again with a different, trying to find my piece here. Hold on a second. There it is. Okay, can you see that?
Affirmative.
Okay, so I decided kind of the best way to start this is no fancy pictures or photographs, but some boring black and white letters on a white page. This is what is the current table of contents for Lane Code Chapter 5. Because I wanted to explain to you what we started with and why this all got kind of pushed out into different chapters of the code. So Chapter 5 of the Lane Code is currently called Administrative Enforcement. And so when I was looking at Chapter 5, I was initially thinking, okay, I'm going to see what I see in most other jurisdictions' codes, which is just the process for enforcing the code. And what I found was that, which is this, the administrative enforcement piece, and then a bunch of other stuff that's not really administrative enforcement. They're actually substantive violations that are enforced in different ways. So just to try to, the modernization code project, which is trying to make things clearer and put things where they're supposed to be, talk to staff about moving this prohibited noise, nuisance, and county community corrections into different places in the code, and just have Chapter 5 be the administrative procedures. So that's what we've done. Chapter 5, as you see it in your packet as proposed, is just the process for enforcing the code. We've taken the noise and we've put it into Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is called offenses, and it has other provisions in it, such as trespass on public property, littering, and traffic regulations. So the noise provisions are going to live, if you adopt this, our recommendation is that they will live in Chapter 6 with those other ones. Chapter 9 is called Environment and Health. And so what we're proposing is to put the nuisance provisions into Chapter 9 and just have a separate nuisance section. You'll notice here that the illicit discharge piece is a type of nuisance in the current code. The illicit discharge is what Moria just explained to you. Our proposal is to take that out of the nuisance section, and it will have its own provisions in Chapter 9. So there'll be Chapter 9 nuisance sections, and then there'll be a separate Chapter 9 for the illicit discharge provisions. And so all of those feed back into Chapter 5 for the enforcement of those violations. So if you have any questions as I move forward through this presentation, feel free to ask. I know it's complicated with Zoom to raise your hand and do all that. But otherwise, I'll just continue with my presentation. It's going to be short. I want to leave time for discussion, obviously the hearing. So the noise gets moved to Chapter 6. Not a whole lot has changed with the noise provisions. What we have taken out of the noise provisions, private right of action that was rarely used and didn't seem to make a lot of sense to leave in there. Now I'm going to switch over. I don't know if this switches over, if I need to. Are you seeing the flow chart?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So what we've done, this flow chart is not part of the code, but it's a visual way to try to figure out how this Chapter 5 is going to work. There was a flow chart like this for the current Chapter 5. It looks pretty similar, but there's some pretty significant changes. And the first significant change is, I'll just kind of walk you through the flow chart here. This is where a complaint comes in, or the county realizes there's a violation short of a complaint. Sometimes it doesn't always happen with a complaint, but it usually does. So staff would go out and they'd investigate, and if they find that they think there is a violation, they'd open up a file. Violation is confirmed down here. In Chapter 5, the way it's written now, it's mostly just what we call a failure to comply. So notice goes out. Currently there would be another square here that is basically for voluntary compliance. Send a letter out, said, it looks like you're violating something, please fix it. We've taken that out at the direction of board to streamline and expedite the process, that it's not really necessary to have that. We'll just jump forward to the order to comply. So back here where the violation is confirmed, you can either go this route to the failure to comply, or down here to a mere citation. So if you have a violation that maybe has already occurred and there's nothing you can really fix, you just issue the citation and you say you violated the code, and we're gonna issue a penalty for that. And that's what this route is. It's much shorter because it goes straight to appeal and then the hearing, and then if there's no appeal, it goes straight to the end here. But I'll walk through the failure to comply process. You send out the order to comply. You try to allow the alleged violator, to actually do what you want them to do, which is fix the violation. If they don't do that, then we get serious and we send them the notice of failure to comply. And it's that notice that basically does the math formula of what the penalty is going to be for failure to comply, and gives them the deadline to comply within a certain period of time. That notice can be appealed by the alleged violator, which would then go to a hearings officer. And that's where we are down here, is the hearings official on that appeal from the alleged violator. So the hearings officer would come out with an enforcement order that again says, yeah, we're serious this time. You really did violate the code and we're going to fine you. And so you come up here and you have the actual fine. And if they don't pay the fine, then we can put a lien on the property. And it's this part where we've got the filing the lien, and the lien has to, the monetary penalties in the lien or multiple liens have to add up to a certain amount in order for the county to foreclose. And so that's where we're stuck here trying to make sure that we have enough money in those liens to justify foreclosure. So part of what we've done in the change to the codes is try to figure out a way to allow the county to get to that higher monetary figure faster so that we can foreclose and not have to wait years and years and years to foreclose on a piece of property. So some other tools that have been added for enforcement include accelerated redemption, which is kind of a narrow tool or a small tool because it only applies if the violator has failed to pay their property taxes and the county is foreclosing for failure to pay the property taxes. Under state law, that alleged violator has to be given 2 years in order to try to redeem the property before the county takes the property. But there's also a state statute that says counties can adopt ordinances that allow the county to come in before that 2-year period. And that's what the Chapter 2 revisions are adding in that county process to allow us to do that. Another tool that we've put in there is some process and authority for the county to come in and inspect the property if the violator says, no, you can't come onto our property. So to get an inspection warrant. You can do it already under the current code, but it's not spelled out clearly. So what we've done is we put some code language in there that spells out that more clearly. So then we have the illicit discharge provisions that Moria explained a bit. Again, as I said, they're taken out of the nuisance provisions, but a lot of the provisions are very similar to what they were when they were in the nuisance provisions. We've changed some of the definitions. For instance, the responsible person is, we've changed that to be more expansive. And in the process of expanding that definition for illicit discharge, we've also expanded it for the rest of Chapter 5. So responsible person is not just the property owner, it's someone who is responsible for a violation who might not be the property owner, but somehow has the authority to violate the code and then correct that. Another change that we made was Moria had identified that there were some RVs that were creating illicit discharges. So when we talk about the subject property, we've included an RV as a property that could be creating that violation. So we've tried to expand avenues for enforcement. We've tried to streamline them, separated out different parts of the code that we felt belonged in different places, made more readable, more logical. And before I end, I do want to make a point of a couple of corrections. As I mentioned, the community corrections piece, we're proposing to put in Chapter 2, although the revised portion of Chapter 2 that you'll see in your packet does not have the county community corrections language. So I believe County Council has indicated that if need be, that could be done by motion. Although if there are any changes, we'll be coming back for a third reading anyway. Another correction that I wanted to make is the repeat violation. So we have escalating penalties in the code so that if you've violated the code in a certain way more than once within a 5-year period, the penalties escalate. So for a repeat violator, there are some cross references in 2 parts of the code that make a cross reference to the wrong section. So basically they cross reference the current section instead of the proposed section. So if and when we get there, we'll have to make that correction to the proposed language. Oh, and then one more change is in the repeat violation. We meant to expand the years, the look back to 5 years. So if you're a repeat violator, if you committed a violation 5 years ago, and you commit it again, you're still a repeat violator as opposed to 3 years ago. And there was a provision in the nuisance provision that didn't catch that 5 years. It still says 3, so we would need to fix that. I think that's it as far as the presentation is pretty high level. You'll see by all the paper that you had to read through that there's a lot of detail there, and we're happy to go as deep and as far as you want to go into that and answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. At this point, I will open the public hearing. And Ms. Jones, ask you, do we have anyone signed up for the public hearing?
Thank you,
Actually,
Chair
public
Farr.
hearing-
At this time,
The public hearing
Pardon
was
me?
already open, I think, but we'll hear public testimony. Go ahead.
at this time, we will take public testimony for ordinance number 22-02. If you are registered to test this ordinance, please raise your virtual hand now, and I will begin calling names and hearing testimony. Chair Farr, I do not see any hands being raised at this point, so I will turn the meeting back over to you.
Well, that's too bad because I was going to allow each person 60 minutes of testimony. Shoot, they missed their opportunity. So at this point, does anyone see any reason to continue the hearing, the public hearing? Seeing no reason to continue the public hearing, I will close the public hearing. Actually, let's step back a little to see if there is any additional staff testimony. Begging your pardon. Any additional staff testimony? Then I will close the public hearing, and at this point encourage discussion by the board, and I will watch the queue for hands. Then I see no one asking to be in the queue. There, we have Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. So I counted, I think, 3 different areas we need to amend language today on the fly. Is something about references, dates, and the community corrections portion of this.
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you guys have a script written for the motion to do so? Because I don't feel comfortable doing that off the top of my head.
We don't have a script, but I think I can restate it for the motion if you would like me to do that.
Give it a shot, please, Ms. Davis. Thanks.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go ahead and do that now, or is there more discussion? Or?
If you want to do that now, we'll have it on hand should there be further discussion.
Okay, let me take a shot at it. Okay, let me get, it'll take me 2 seconds here.
And just to clarify, I assume that if we read those changes in today, we'll still have to have a 3rd reading of the ordinance before we approve it.
I'm gonna let Lindsay answer that.
Yes, as long as there's, I believe, county council can also interrupt me if I'm incorrect, but I believe as long as we read it into the motion today, then the second appearance before the public would be the 3rd reading, and then that would be the last, that you could make a vote on that language at that point.
And as I go through this, I know that county council might have an opinion how that community correction piece gets framed in the motion. So I don't know if they want me to take a shot at it, or Sarah or Andy, do you want to say something about the community corrections piece? Okay.
This is Sarah Chinsky, Assistant County Counsel. I don't have a script prepared, but it's a non-substantive change. It's simply moving the provision from one section to another. There is no substantive change to the actual provision.
Okay, so I think the motion would just be that the proposed changes to Chapter 2 would include the current language of the community corrections code language. Is that right, Sarah?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
So just moving the current community corrections language that is in chapter 5 and moving it to chapter 2. So that's that piece of the motion. And then the other stuff is more detailed kind of typo stuff. And I will identify those now. In the proposed chapter 9 nuisance section, 9.574, subsection 18 should read, a responsible person who has caused to come into or continue in existence a nuisance similar to a nuisance for which the person was responsible within the past 5 years instead of within the past 2 years. And then subsection 19 of that same section, for responsible person or person responsible, it should say, as defined in Lane Code 5.025.005 instead of Lane Code 5.005 subsection 10. And a similar change for the illicit discharge provisions in 9.021, 9.021 subsection 1J, where it says responsible person as defined in Lane Code 5.025.005 instead of Lane Code 5.005 subsection capital Y. That's it.
Then I'll ask Commissioner Bozievich, do you have enough to make a motion when the time comes?
I hate to say this, but I almost feel it's more appropriate for us to approve, close the hearing, approve the second reading, and direct staff to make those changes for a third reading, and we'll have to have a fourth. There's no way I can do that on the fly.
And as much as I tried to keep writing on that, there is a little bit more language there than I think we can easily do on the fly. And Commissioner Burney, have your hand raised to this item?
Well, actually, I had my hand raised before.
For the queue, yeah.
No, it's for this, but before you and Commissioner Bozievich had your discussion, because I also, unless there's a time-sensitive nature to approve something on the fly, am just uncomfortable making notes and making scribbles and approving it. It just doesn't seem like it's ready for that yet, although I wish it was.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. I became uncomfortable as my fingers couldn't keep up with the voice. So, so very good. Then let's continue with the discussion. Commissioner Bozievich, you still have the floor, and you'll be followed by Commissioner Burney.
I'll just very quickly say I'm very supportive of these changes. Having been a rural commissioner for nearly 3 terms now, I understand how difficult the enforcement process is, to the point where we had a person living on a piece of foreclosed property in a shed illegally, collecting tires and junk and committing multiple crimes, and we still couldn't get that person in compliance and that property in compliance, partly because of the whole paper trail with banks, and you can't find the bank that actually holds the paper for the foreclosure. But all of our liens were secondary to the foreclosure. So we had huge amounts of fines levied and everything. This will help that kind of situation, I think, immensely. So I really appreciate staff's hard work on this. I wish the language was right so we could pass it now, and I hate delaying another 2 weeks because third and then a fourth reading to get to the point, and then we got to wait for it to be with an ordinance. I don't think it has an emergency clause on it, unless we want to add that now, but I don't think this justifies an emergency clause. So we still got to wait the 30 days to be effective. So just I think it's a really great set of changes, and I appreciate all the work staff's done. So I think we just need to take the time to do it right. It's correcting a lot of issues, particularly with the illicit discharge. That's something I'm seeing quite a bit of. There's a fair amount of people in the pandemic that have had to resort to living in an RV on a friend's property, unfortunately, and a lot of them are doing it well and in staying within the law, but a few of them have chosen to do so and just dump their RVs on the ground. And we need to be able to get to those people and get that corrected because it's not very safe. Appreciate all the work staff's done, support the ordinance, and hopefully we'll get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. And Ms. Eichner, please.
Thank you for letting me interrupt your discussion. I did want to raise that I don't think we verbally said it during the presentation earlier, but the MS4 permit does technically have a deadline. We're supposed to get it adopted by the end of February. So my apologies that there are some typos in the ordinance, but I'm hoping that if we could get on the agenda for February 8th and then have a fourth reading on March 1st, that would be close enough. If we were able to, if you would support adding an emergency clause to the ordinance so that it would be effective on March 1st.
I think we can accommodate them. Ms. Eichner, we're going to be down on the 15th and the 22nd. So those are the next 2 days. So we do have board meetings of the after February 1st. We have February 8th and March 1st. So let's continue with the queue before I ask for a motion. Commissioner Burney, you have lowered your hand. Do you have any further to speak?
I spoke my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we'll move to Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just still in problem solving mode here. I don't have strong feeling one way or the other if we can accommodate it with the timing that was just outlined, but I did note the chapters and the sort of chapter and verse, but not the actual language. So if we wanted to, I could make a motion citing those and saying with the details as read into the record by staff, if that's helpful in a way to move us into the third reading sooner rather than a third and then a fourth.
I'll call for the motion in just a moment then, making certain the queue is empty. And at this point, the queue is empty. Any further discussion to the ordinance, to the discussion? Commissioner Bozievich.
Yeah, just real quick, Vice Chair, I'm okay with that. I think because I believe Ms. Davies read it with specificity. There's that word, Pat. The actual
poison the word.
I just wasn't going to be able to repeat that. I think that might work, but I think now that we're going into February with approval to be effective by the end of February, we will need an emergency clause. So you might want to, in addition, and adding an emergency clause to your motion.
Thank you. Then Ms. Eichner, Ms. Davies, Ms. Chinsky, you're with us still. Any further discussion from staff? I see none, then I'll ask for a motion. Vice Chair Trigger.
Sure, and if this meets with folks' approval without the specificity that was just discussed, I will move for a third reading and public hearing ordinance number 22-02 in the matter of amending Lane Code chapters 2, 5, 6, and 9 to modernize and update general organization functions, procedures, and processes, and adopting severability clause with the changes to the language regarding community corrections moving from chapter 5 to chapter 2, and with the details read into the record by staff regarding chapter 9, section 9.574, subsections 18 and 19, and section 9.021, subsection 1J, and with the addition of an emergency clause.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trigger, seconded by Commissioner Bozievich. Before I move along with this request for discussion, I do see that Jane Burgess is, Ms. Burgess, you raised your hand. Was that for a comment?
Hi, this is Cheryl Lockhart.
Oh, hi, Cheryl.
We're all together in this one area here. I did happen to see, just at this moment, I saw one other change, and it's in the Lane Code chapter 5.025.025 under administrative remedies. AF and it talks about the maximum violation per day. In that section, what I'm seeing is it's listed as $1,000 per day. And I believe we wanted to up that to $2,000 per day.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Then to the maker of the motion, Vice Chair Trigger, do you accept that as a friendly, and will staff accommodate that as a friendly?
I do accept that as a addition to the motion.
Thank you.
I'm good with that.
Very good. Then we'll move forward. Discussion to the motion as moved by Vice Chair Trigger, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich. I have Commissioner Buck, followed by Commissioner Burney.
I too just want to give my appreciation on these changes. I know it's quite complicated in the language and all the movement of what we're trying to ultimately accomplish, which is be able to address our residents when they call us. Generally, this is a pretty common occurrence for our rural commissioner locations, maybe not quite as common for our urban commissioners, but it will significantly help us when we are able to talk people through the procedure for a nuisance property that they may find. I have to say, I get a couple of calls every single month regarding this issue. And of course, enforcement has always been the problem, and just the being able to understand it as a person who's calling in. You know, it's not easy. It's not, it's fairly complicated, but I want to be able to convey to them in, you know, the flow chart that was presented, a helpful way so they know what to expect and the outcome, and that we're trying to do this as quickly and expeditiously as possible for them. Sometimes it takes a long time and it's not the most ideal in every situation, but I think this will go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Burney.
I want to echo everything Commissioner Buck said. I'd like to say it better, but I can't. I would like to thank Vice Chair Trieger, because I could not get my head around it, and thank you, because this actually solves a problem to move it forward. And I would like to say to commissioners, Commissioner Bozovich and Chair Farr, specificity is not that specificity. I believe all commissioners see this as simply aligning good government to take care of a problem. So I'm glad we could move this forward. Thank you.
Thanks. I want to thank you for that, Chair Burney. Thank you, Chair Burney. Rocking Chair Burney, excuse me. Then I see no further discussion. And Commissioner, anything further from staff? At which point then I will call for the vote with the everything. Yes, do we have the time certain listed?
Yes, that's what I need to, I need to ask Lindsay if she needs us to be a time certain.
This is Andy Clark. I'll weigh in real quick. If all we're doing is another reading and deliberation, we won't need a time certain since the hearing is closed.
Very good. So, but it will be on, we would anticipate on February 8th, and I would guess at 1:30. So very good. Any additions before we vote on the motion? Then I will call for the vote. Since we're not passing the ordinance, this is just a regular sound vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you for the work on this. As other commissioners have said, this will take us a long way down the road to making it easier to enforce compliance. Thank you very much. So moving down our agenda, we'll step down to item 14A, which is a second reading and public hearing on Ordinance 22-02. And that is...
Commissioner, just did that item?
We just did that item, and we're rolling forward the order. Item 14B will be rolled forward with the ordinance. We'll move down to 14C, correct, which is order 22-01, 25-05, in the matter of approving the draft climate ordinance plan phase 2 community greenhouse mitigation action plan. And we have the document before us, and for anyone paying attention, watching online, and there may be a few people, if you click view material, it will give you the draft document. And if you look at the second page of that draft document, I believe it's the second page where Commissioner Burney gives us a greeting on the document. Bearing that in mind, after Mr. Mokrice introduces staff and with the staff presentation, Commissioner Burnham, I'm going to invite you to talk about your greeting and what the ordinance and comments on the ordinance. So Mr. Mokrice, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your panel.
Thank you, Chair. And we have Dan Hurley, our Public Works Director, with us, as well as Mark Nystrom, Lane County's climate strategist. So I'll turn it over to Dan and Mark to walk through the presentation.
Sorry, Dan, you're muted.
Of course. All right, thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So we were here today to present the Phase 2 Climate Action Plan. This is our community climate action plan, our greenhouse gas mitigation plan, to you today for approval. And I think, are we out of order? Because do we want to get back in order here? Because I was expecting to come next, and I see Ms. Davies waiting on the call. So Chair, do you want to address that or keep going? And you're on mute, sorry.
Thanks for pointing that out, Mr. Hurley. Ms. Davies, did you have further comment?
Yeah, I think that there was an order after the ordinance that we needed to address.
Item 14B.
The order rolls forward with the ordinance, I do believe. Is that correct, Ms. Jones?
That is correct.
Sorry.
Yeah, so that'll be considered on February 8th also. Thank you very much for keeping us in line. Back to you, Mr. Hurley.
Okay, back to the climate action plan. So we climate strategist, Mark Nystrom, presented the plan and took you through the 11 high impact action items in the plan and the plan in its entirety. At that point, we didn't receive any feedback from the board on edits to make to the plan. And so we plan to bring this actually back on consent. But in the last week, we received a number of comments from stakeholders in the community, and it sounds like the rest of the board has also received emails, most specifically around the issue of natural gas. And so we could speak to those comments. We have Mark here who could speak to those. We could go through the action items again in the plan for review, or we could bring this back at a later point. I think staff would like to be able to address the comments that we've received by email and make sure that we have a plan that is well supported by the community and that we have the time to do that. So those are a few options we're presenting for you today, and would like your direction. And Chair, you're on mute. Chair, we can't hear you.
Oh no, it was great. You should have heard it. It was wonderful. What I stated was this to the board. We have Mr. Hurley's presented some options, and I'm just asking to see if the board has any comment regarding the options that Mr. Hurley passed along, including delay in action today and taking and asking staff to respond via email or via written communication on the draft climate action plan and the comments that we received in the last couple of weeks. So at this point, we have, I'd said that I was going to ask Commissioner Burney to talk about it first. So we have a plethora of hands risen. So I'll go to Commissioner Burney. And pardon me if I'm jumping queue on that, but Commissioner Burney.
Well, this certainly isn't rehearsed. First, I was looking forward to the report, Mark. And I was looking forward to the report and then was going to make some comments. I guess I'll make comments now. By way of background, when I naively, one of my first meetings a few years ago, asked, having come out of retiring from a very successful clean energy, commercial and industrial retrofit business, when I asked what the carbon footprint of Lane County was a few years ago, I did not anticipate the answer, we don't know. But that was the answer. And I'm very appreciative that from that came an inventory of what the county's carbon footprint actually is, the county as an organization, not all of the county. And I was, and here we are with this. So I'm going to say one other thing. I don't think there's anyone that's well, there's probably lots of people, but I'm very attached to tangible movement forward to mitigate carbon emissions. I'm delighted that the purchasing together of all of the consumer-owned utilities in Lane County will in fact be only purchasing clean renewable energy to supplement their energy portfolios in the early 2030s, and that's a fact. I'm behind several of the building trades with their pension trust funds financing renewable energy infrastructure. In my business, my company won an award, and this is where it relates to this. We won an award because the business footprint was the state of California, and we were the state legislators at that time were developing energy efficiency requirements for buildings, for large commercial buildings. And they were developing legislation around how to get there. And in fact, my business with many of the building trades said, wait a minute, let's all agree on what the targets are, but don't tell business how to get there. Let's see if we can't partner with business, come up with some innovative ideas, and get there even faster. So with that as a backdrop, in the 11th hour, I've received some fascinating input, which suggests we ought to perhaps take a no less than 30 and no more than 60-day pause. So in fact, we can get the input from folks who, and I'm going to share with you who they were, from folks who have to a group said there's a lot of good stuff in here. There's a lot of really good stuff. We just want the opportunity, whether it's meeting with the consultants, good company that developed this thing, whether, you know, whatever it is, we want input. Before this morning, those two groups were Springfield Chamber representing several industries and Northwest Natural Gas. And I confess, having read the 4-pager from Northwest Natural, there's points in there which I think are salient and can help us achieve the goals of this aspirational document. And it's my understanding that there has, Mark, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but there has not yet been that opportunity for them to speak with the consultants on what their really their inputs were, which were pretty substantial. I also received a call from a couple of the building trades that also, it's not like they're against it. They want to be supportive of this, but they just want to be heard and listened to and assess the impact on jobs of their members, which is legit, right? Just like a Northwest Natural or any energy company that knows which way the market is going and wants to organize private resources to help get there, because that will be more business for them, in fact, wants to input. We heard this morning from Lisa Arkin of Beyond Toxics. So it's very interesting to me that you get fundamentally different groups, all of whom are saying, wait a second, we like a lot of what's in here. Can we make some inputs? Do I think that waiting a minimum of 30 or a maximum of 60 days to bring this back to us, do I think everyone's oar will be in the same direction? Always, absolutely not. But I believe we have a golden opportunity here to take advantage of their input, which probably wouldn't have arrived until this decision-making happened. So I'm sure that staff have reached out, and it's not an unfamiliar dynamic, right? That you reach out, you don't get input, a decision is going to be made, the world wants to input. But I propose we give them that opportunity through a 30 to 60-day pause to provide that input, and then we make some decisions, because I'm telling you 90% of this thing I'm good with, and I would be asking fundamentally different questions if in fact, and will, if in fact we're actually going to vote on approving it today. I, as someone that believes in this heart and soul, am asking for a 30 to 60-day delay before we take action, so we can field inputs, people can see that their inputs are taken seriously, and we can build a much bigger coalition moving forward. Thank you, Chair. I never practiced that, by the way. It just came out.
Well done. Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Then next we have Commissioner Buck, who will be followed by Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Chair. I too was going to say we have blocked the time here. So if there's parts of the report that we should hear today, we might as well hear them. But also the fact that we have received some relatively recent comments from all different perspectives of this climate action plan. I feel it's also prudent to make sure that we can respond and get to the heart of their issues before we make any final call. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Buck. This was originally intended for a consent calendar until the agenda team got to it last week and we changed it. We pulled it from the consent calendar. So there may not be anything specific new that you want to add, Mr. Hurley, but I'll move along to to Commissioner Bozievich, followed by Vice Chair Krieger. You're muted, Commissioner Bozievich.
Excuse me. I originally raised my hand and then put it back down when you at first were asking about delay, because I was going to request a delay also, similar to Commissioner Burney. God, it's hard not to call you chair after a year. So forgive me, Chair Farr, if I call Commissioner Burney chair now and then.
And forgive me, Chair Farr, if I enjoy it when he does.
Well, I've already done it twice today, so I guess we're all in the same boat.
But yeah, I was going to ask for the delay specifically to address the issue of aligning the plan with the governor's climate protection plan that was final promulgation was in December. There were questions raised during the process at points about keeping the alignment with that, and we marched ahead without that. Very similar to how we marched ahead looking into a polystyrene ban, despite the fact we knew the state was taking product stewardship action in the legislature. We need to kind of learn a lesson from that and back up and match these two things up and make sure that we are accounting for what state law now requires and that our projections of carbon impact are based on those as the base, not as they were taking, a lot of what we're claiming to have impact on now is already covered, I think, in some of the state law. I am still greatly concerned with the portions of this that allows for greater use of our electric grid during peak generation periods, while also calling for the decarbonization. I am going to forward to Mr. Nystrom, Mr. Hurley, and the rest of the board a link to a September 10th, 2019 memo from a system analyst with the Northwest Power and Conservation Council that basically talks about our grid, our resource adequacy for the Northwest grid. And it talks about our loss of load probability, which in normal person speak is our probability of blackouts. And the generalized acceptable max for that is 5%. We are at the time this was written, it was at 7.5%. Based on the retirement of some coal resources by 2024, it's projected to be at 8.2%. And if we continue on our path by 2030, it's projected to be at 33% for blackouts. We have to take some of this information into consideration. And if we're talking about equity and impacts, I guarantee the 1% that can buy in, whole home generators and bury a propane tank aren't going to be impacted by sporadic blackouts like, lower income people and people of color. So I really hope that we back up, take a pause, true this plan up with the state climate protection plan, and also reconsider some of those issues where we are asking for actions that will have real impact on grid stability. And that's so generally I'm just in a long-winded way saying I agree with Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. We next have Vice Chair Trieger, followed by Commissioner Burney in the second round. And I'm going to make a quick statement before we come back to you, Commissioner Burney. So Commissioner Trieger, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I also, as someone said quite a while ago, would still like a presentation. We did set aside the time, and I think it's helpful. And I will just say at this stage, I appreciate the comments that have been made before and the folks that have reached out via email. I do know that tends to be the nature of things, but also this wasn't a last minute item, right? We've been working on this for a couple of years now. And I am looking through the action section in particular of the plan and seeing that scattered throughout pretty much every single action, there is some combination of the source being community meetings or stakeholders, interviews and so on. So we haven't not done community outreach. And what we're being asked to do today is adopt a draft plan. This is not an ordinance. And I think we would all agree that the only thing second worse than creating a plan and having it sit on a shelf is creating a plan that is so rigid or static when it comes to how we approach its content that we're locked in. I don't think this plan is that. I think we have an obligation to, particularly since it was going to be on consent, to adopt this, to demonstrate to the community our commitment to moving forward on this really weighty, critical, and big issue that has so much intersection with so many other parts and pieces of county operations and impacts on community. And so I would like us to move forward and adopt the plan so that we can start putting it into action, so that we can see what it looks and feels like when we try to actually implement it. If we stay in this hamster wheel of planning, we won't learn as much. So I would like to see us, I would be a proponent for adopting and then maybe directing for checkbacks from staff about how the implementation is going and what is the plan to do more stakeholder and community engagement to get feedback for where the plan will need to be adjusted as we move forward. Because a good plan is an outline. It's, again, not an ordinance, and we can make adjustments in real time once we learn what implementation really looks and feels like.
Thank you, Commissioner Trieger. And I'll take a few moments myself. And you said you gave me a great visual of a hamster wheel of planning. And I thought about Envision Eugene, which started in 2009 and was still spinning in 2018. That is a hamster wheel. I listened closely to what Commissioner Burney had to say, and I agree with the sentiment. 30 days, no more than 60 days. That doesn't seem interminable to me. That seems like a plan of action. So one thing I'd like to say, the only thing I'd like to say, and this is a quote, these aren't my words. The Community Action Plan is an opportunity not only to address climate change, but also to develop green jobs, build resistant communities, and support equity. The plan shows us how Lane County residents, organizations, and others can act, support, and collaborate to reduce emissions, still maintain the high quality of life we enjoy in Lane County. So I believe that by stepping back for 30 to 60 days, that gives a greater chance for collaboration and a greater chance for more universal support of what is going to be this final action plan without really putting it into an interminable spinning process. I've seen that in government. I see it going on in government, and Lane County is not a place you typically see that. And I don't believe that this would put us into such a wheel. So with that, I'll go back to you, Commissioner Burney, for the second round. Thank you.
As Dan said, of course I am. I'm going to be very, very brief here. I absolutely support this effort by staff, and thank you for it. 1. 2, forgive me, but this is not a hamster wheel. 30 to 60 days on a topic like this to create more consensus, more opportunity for key input is a smart move that will save us a lot of potential hamster wheeling down the road. And finally, the reason I raised my hand was because I just want to give you a for instance, because this related to something I think Commissioner Bozovich said. In my old world, years ago, and this is now happening, there was so much installation of battery storage in residences and commercials in the markets that we worked in. Guess what they were developing and now have? something called a virtual power plant. That virtual power plant, because software in fact can organize where those stored electrons go without creating anything that creates any carbon emissions, can in fact be used during peak or load periods. There is an exciting world out there of new technology as it relates to this. And all I'm saying is, let's take 30 to 60 days and get as many people on board, listen to what they say, consider it, and get going with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Burney. I've heard discussion or comments among the board that would like to see a presentation. This item this afternoon was scheduled for 45 minutes instead of the 0 it had prior to being pulled from the consent calendar. So, Mr. Nystrom, Mr. Hurley, can I ask you to give us a presentation? I'll bet you're prepared. If you could keep it fairly concise, but don't omit details that need to be brought forward. So without opposition from the board, let's move forward with the staff presentation.
Certainly, Chair. We're happy to run through that. We just didn't want to waste your time. It will be the same slides you saw on December 7th, but we'd be happy to hit the highlights of that again. Mark, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. And before we start with the slides, I want to acknowledge that everyone said something that I agree with, so I really appreciate hearing that from our leadership. It does mean a lot to me to know that the staff work is being supported by our commissioners, and vice versa. I wanted to address a couple of things around natural gas infrastructure that before I start with the slides, that I think there's some confusion and there's a nuance in the plan. We have what's a plan in place, and then we did technical background work, and that technical background work was assigned our technical memo, and that was really an exercise to say what if, and we really wanted to look at what would happen if we converted all sedans to 100% EVs, or we converted all diesel trucks to renewable diesel. And so that's where those numbers come from. It's a what if exercise. And I think a lot of people read that and thought that Lane County was suddenly going to start regulating natural gas infrastructure. And I know that this has been brought into question, but we checked with County Council a long time ago about this. And the state has explicitly stated that we don't have that regulatory authority to regulate what's in our right-of-ways. So, and I know that there's some folks that are working on this issue, but I just want to affirm to our friends at the Chambers of Commerce. I've heard from both of them, from the different groups that represent those industries that are related to that. We're not proposing that. That was part of a what if scenario, because at the end of the day, what I wanted to demonstrate was, or what we wanted to demonstrate was that that there's hope. So much news that we hear about climate change is bad news, and it's doom and gloom. And what we were showing is that there's 73% of our emissions could be reduced with available technology right now, and that's pretty impressive. The other thing I wanted to address, Commissioner Bozovich's concern about the CCP. I presented this like 3 days before the CCP was passed, and I completely agree with you. We need to align these two plans, and that would have been kind of the next step going forward. There was a point where Build Back America was in question, and that's going to impact our emissions. And the infrastructure bill, we had to make a decision at a point to just stick a pin in a point in time and say, this is what we're going to present you. So I want to acknowledge those two things. In addition, I want to just thank Northwest Natural for being so upfront and open about their concerns. They've been really great at communicating, and I think that there's an opportunity. We've already been talking that we need to talk more, and Good Company has talked about that as well. That they need to know more information from Northwest Natural when they're scaling these projects. This is not a Lane County issue. This is every community in Oregon who's creating a climate action plan, because fossil natural gas is one of our largest emitters of greenhouse gas at this moment. And Northwest Natural has a plan to decarbonize that, and I'm really curious to hear more about the feasibility of all that, those possibilities. But with that, I'm going to just show you a couple of slides just to remind you what the actions are. And instead of talking about what the actions are, I'm going to highlight some of the concerns that were raised in some of the other emails that were directed to you in the last 48 hours. By the way, I'm a former high school teacher. This feels very much like a high school assignment where you give someone a couple of months to do a long-term project, and then 3 days before the assignment's due, the questions start flooding in. Wait, what did you mean? So this is very familiar territory. So I'm going to share my screen for a couple of minutes and to show you this lovely picture. And hopefully you see the correct screen. And where's my next slide? Oh. All right. So again, this is related to the board order. I'm not going to talk about this too much. I did want to address this particular piece. Phase one was an internal greenhouse gas inventory. I want to address, we received a letter today, and I saw something in the Register Guard that says that 80% of Lane County's, the community's emissions are due to our landfill. I just want to correct that for everyone out there. That's 80% of our operational inventory. It's not the community. And so please check out phase one. We have a climate action plan. We're addressing those emissions. We have a feasibility study for our landfill anaerobic digester that's about to come out. We're moving in the right direction. I feel really confident about that. Phase two is what we're talking about now. And phase three is in motion right now. This was the inventory that we presented to you. So that 80% that folks were concerned with narrows down to about 4% when you look at the county-wide emissions. But starting on the left, we have electricity and natural gas, propane, those things. Electricity in this is the building energy is about 21% of our emissions. Electricity accounts for about 10% of that. And you need to remember that electricity is across the whole county. Our natural gas and propane users are pretty selective. So it's a much smaller subset. And yet, because there's no substitutes for natural gas in certain situations, those emissions are a little higher. The CPP, for those of you listening at home, that's the Oregon Climate Protection Plan. They call for Northwest Natural to be 90% carbon-free by the year 2050. Our next section is transportation energy. This is clearly where we need to focus most of our energy. This is cars, trucks, buses, heavy vehicles. We have a disproportionately high emissions of diesel, and that's probably because we have a lot of trucks going through. I say probably because we're deducting that because we're not taking a census of the vehicles going through. Industrial processes and refrigerants, this is a scaled down version from a national study. So it's a per capita on the refrigerants. There is no good accounting right now, and this is an area that the state of Oregon needs to address. We're regulated by the EPA on refrigerants, and the EPA this particular office is out of Chicago. So it's a long ways away from the emissions associated with refrigerants. And then agricultural, forestry, and land use. Due to lack of data available, this only includes livestock. So it's cows and sheep primarily. And I know that there's been some concerns around forestry. Met earlier last month, I guess it was, with the Department of Forestry, the Department of State Lands, to talk about what their climate plans are. They're doing a lot of really good work. I don't mean to punt to them, but it's a crowded space, and we're going to continue those conversations. I think they're doing some really The burgundy, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that right now, but just except to just stress everything we buy comes with upstream emissions. And fuel production is our largest problem here. It takes fuel to get fuel. And so I want to keep stressing that. And then finally, greenhouse gas sequestration. Our trees, we have 80% forests, somewhere around that number. We're sequestering 3.5 million metric tons on an annual basis. And that's really, really helpful, but we don't count that. It doesn't give us a get out of jail free card. We still need to reduce our emissions. And there was talk about the public engagement on mitigation actions. I've had conversations with a few people who said they attended the community meetings about the issues that they're concerned with, but they didn't speak up because they felt like that they might get negative feedback. We need to work on this. When I say we, me, and the rest of our team needs to work on how do we get robust feedback before we're kind of holding a decision in front of them. I do admit that, and anyone has any good answers, please let me know. But when you look at our survey results versus the surveys that, let's say, Northwest Natural is sending out, we get different samples and we get different results. And these are the high impact practices that we recognized. We have electric vehicles, R99, electric grid decarbonization, appliance electrification, mass transit, edible food waste, refrigerant management, active commute, landfill, anaerobic digester, energy efficiency and conservation, and then natural gas. When you add up all the potential benefits, that 73% of our emissions can be reduced by the year 2040. And this is kind of an annual look at it. So in the year 2040, by having 100% electric vehicles, we would reduce our emissions in that year alone by 1.5 million metric tons. And it goes from the highest, we stress these are the most important ones that we address. We may not have 100% EVs by that point. We may not have, Commissioner Bozovich brought up the load issues. And some other technology may emerge. We may be using hydrogen cars. We just wanted to look at what would happen if. And so I'm not trying to sell you that we have to have 100% of EVs. We have to have 100% carbon free or low carbon transportation is the key here. And then as you go across, these go from the highest impacts down to the lowest impact. And you can see that they all have a significant amount of impact, but those two transportation bars are just pretty overwhelming. And then finally, I want to share with you this pie graph or donut graph that demonstrates that when we're looking at transportation emissions, we know out of the 66% of emissions that we have, we can reduce 60% of those just with given technology or current technology. With I expect these numbers to change with our building energy once we work with Northwest Natural and look at the amount of renewable natural gas that they're using already. And so the 11% should get bigger, the 10% should get correspondingly smaller. Refrigerants, this is again, the United States has taken action. They signed us into the Kigali Agreement, and that means that we're going to start eliminating a lot of the worst emissions. In the waste sector, unfortunately, that 1% is our anaerobic digester. The great thing about the anaerobic digester is that it gives us benefits for years to come. The hard thing to reconcile is that we already have a bunch of waste that's in the landfill and it will continue to decompose. And then finally, agriculture and land use. This is an area some people have brought up. We do need to work more on this. This was on the to be discussed in the future action. We actually had a phone call with some stakeholders today, and so this is an area that Lane County can continue to work on. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass it back to Dan, And as soon as I figure out how to stop sharing, I'll let you know. There it is. And so Dan?
Thanks for that, Mark. I appreciate you running through some of that again and refreshing our memory. So commissioners, as you can see, there's a lot of great work that's happened here. I'm proud of what we have created in the plan and the outreach that we went through. Mark led quite a bit of robust outreach in the community to get to this point. I'm not frustrated that we have this interest at the last minute. I think it's great that people are reading the plan and taking interest in it. And where we go from here, we have two options. One would be to take another couple of months. Happy to do that. We've been at this for a couple of years. I do want to get to an approved plan as soon as we can. I think that's important to have a direction for our community, some guidance for our organization. And it's a good thing to be able to point to as we try to seek grant funding for various programs. So, but another couple months, that's not an issue, and I'm happy to address the comments that we've received to date. The alternative would be, as Vice Chair suggested, it would be to approve what we have today. And remember that this plan shouldn't be static, that we plan to amend it regularly. As we know, as we learn more information, we are planning to amend it as soon as we can as we work through issues around forestry. We have a subgroup working from our Climate Action Committee on that specific topic. And we'll be bringing regular updates to this plan as we move along through implementation. So those would be the two main options, and we'll leave it to you to give direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley, Mr. Nystrom. Any questions from the board regarding the presentation? I'm looking to the queue. I see none, but usually that's an indication that somebody will show their hand. Still see none. There we go. Commissioner Burney, followed by Commissioner Buck.
Oh, I just wanted to let the chair know that I'm ready to make a motion whenever it's time.
Excellent. Then I'll look to you once other commissioners have had a chance to say their piece. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to share my support with giving a little bit more time to address the needs that the community just brought in this week. Again, not too long, but if that's part of what Commissioner Burney's motion was going to be, I'm sorry if I interrupted there.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for staff. Is there anything that a pause or a delay of 30 or 60 days that we would be precluded from doing? Any actions we would be taking during that pause that we'd be precluded from doing were we to adopt the plan today, with then later direction from staff to bring back a report on stakeholder outreach and engagement and adaptations that are needed to the plan?
Vice Chair, I'm not aware of any issues that would cause.
Thank you, Commissioner. I see no further hands in the queue. I'll just jump to the closing statement. And the first part of that says, this is a living document discussing a fast evolving challenge. That's all I'll say about the closing statement. And I would agree with that. And whatever we do today and whatever we do in 60 days, that remains a constant. This will be a living document, and it is a fast evolving challenge. Commissioner Burney, I'll turn it back to you for a potential motion.
Thank you very much. And can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Oh, okay. I never know when I'm on or off. Hey, Mark, how long ago did you teach high school?
I taught high school for 13 years. My last couple of years were in Willamette High School out in Bethel in 2008.
Well, as someone that was a tenured high school teacher but hasn't taught since '78, your comment was very poignant, and I muted myself while I was laughing. I want to move that, and Mark, you and Dan, I thoroughly support this, and we're gonna, not only we're gonna have a plan, but we're gonna have more buy-in and we're gonna have more partners. I'm going to move that we reschedule action on the I'm sorry. How long will it take, Mark and Dan, do you think, because that's going to be the days I put in here, to do the reach out and to maybe for good company to maybe factor in some of the inputs into what you present us? 45 days, 30, 60, you tell me.
Sure, let's put 60. It takes 3 weeks to get something on the board calendar, so
Okay.
30 would be pretty tight. If we gave ourselves 60, that would be great.
Sorry, Chair. I'll now make the motion. I move that within 60 days, that this draft climate plan be presented for a vote for approval or not. That's my motion. That should give you the time to do what needs to be done.
Excellent. I'm holding for a second.
I'll second that. Although I'm just questionable whether we need to have a motion to make that happen or not.
Oh.
we may or may not, but since we have one, you know, we seem fairly cohesive on the response. So in a second, I'll ask for discussion to the motion that's moved by Commissioner Burney, seconded by Commissioner Buck. And Mr. Nystrom, you taught at Willamette High School. I'd like to point out something that I read this week, that Willamette High School had the highest graduation rates in all of Lane County last year. Congratulations on your former teaching. Then discussion to the motion made by Commissioner Burney, seconded by Commissioner Trieger. I see no discussion, then I will call for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry, there we go, I see it now. Vice Chair Trieger, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, based on Commissioner Buck's comment, would this otherwise be accomplished by simply tabling this order and then during future board assignments, assign it to come back after some further stakeholder engagement and outreach? Just procedurally, is that how we would handle that otherwise?
If that's a question for me, that would be a course of action. It would, to go to that, it would require a withdrawal of the motion and an agreement by the second. But so yes, that would be a course of action. We currently have before us a motion, which barring any further discussion, I'll call for the vote. I see none.
If I may, Diana, Chair Farr.
Yes, please.
The motion as it stands has the same effect as Commissioner Trieger's suggestion. I've already noted that the order is tabled for lack of a vote and the new motion was there.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And Commissioner Burney, you have a hand raised.
Oh, I just wanted to say I could care less how we do it. Whatever's right is fine. I just want to make sure that it's clear that there's a time frame within which this will be brought back to the board, and that'd be no more than 60 days. That's all. So however is appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
So the question before us, do we want ice cream or gelato for dessert? We do have a motion. I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
I believe we have a unanimous vote on that. All present voted aye. Passes unanimously. Mr. Hurley, thank you. Mr. Nystrom, thank you for your ongoing work, and thanks for raising those great graduate students at Willamette High School. Mr. Mokrzycki, anything further on this subject?
No, thank you, Chair.
Chair, given when Mr. Nystrom taught, if he had any impact on the graduation rate, we're talking about 30, 35-year-old graduates of Willamette High School.
Well, you know, I talk about Willamette High School quite often. Go Wolverines. All right. Then we'll move along with the agenda. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for the discussion to the board. We're moving along to item 15A, which is Commissioner's Business Announcements. I'll look to the queue for any announcements by commissioners. I see none. Any future board assignment requests? Commissioner Burney.
Given our last discussion, I have a request that staff look into ways in which the county can support residential and commercial energy efficiency, renewable energy, car chargers, and bring back a series of options, such as something called property assessed clean energy. So we can look at maybe a role we could play to encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burnett. I'll look for acquiescence to that via up and down motion of the chin. Head nods. Yeah.
Clarifying question. On that,
Commissioner Book.
thank you. Is that not what we're doing with the climate action plan already, or how is it different?
There is nothing in the climate action plan that talks about incentives that the county could provide. In that I used PACE as an example, property assessed clean energy. That would actually, the county treasurer would want, the county tax assessor would want to weigh in on that. There are reasons some tax assessors in Oregon are against that. There are reasons why some are for it. So whatever the Climate Action Committee or the plan came up with, this specifically would deal with the treasurer tax collector. So I was just using that as an example to get at something. The Climate Action Plan is not, well, look in there, maybe it does. I don't believe it talks about how counties can incent residences and businesses to weatherize their buildings. And because there's a lot of money coming down from that for the federal government, I just thought it might be good for us to give it some attention.
And my input on that is doing good should be incentive enough, but quite often, Chair Burney, it's not. And I'm in favor of incentives to help people recognize what they can do. So I'm with you on that. So do we have acquiescence on that to put that on a future board assignment, as a future board assignment? Okay, Ms. Moker, I see we do have yeses on that. Any further future board assignments? I see none. Then we'll move along with the agenda to County Administration, County Council, Mr. Dingle. Announcements.
Chair Farr, County Council has no announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle. And County Administration announcements.
I have no announcements, Chair, unless there are questions.
Thank you very much. And I mixed my agendas up a little bit right there. I didn't even need to ask you guys that. That was earlier in the day. So thank you very much. So we'll have a review of assignments. And Mr. Mokrahasky, can you review any assignments you may have received?
I just have the one from Commissioner Burney requesting that staff look into what I heard was residential and commercial energy efficiency incentives. And so we can take that assignment. I can attempt to assign it to somebody, but I want to make sure that, you know, when we have staff go down this path of doing research and bringing back options and recommendations, that sometimes there's a gap in understanding of what the commissioners are requesting and then what is delivered. So I just want to be very clear about what the expectation is from the board on what we bring back to you.
Commissioner Burney?
I'd be happy to spend 10 minutes providing clarity offline if that would be helpful.
I would acquiesce to that. Yeah, absolutely. And that being said, we have kind of front burner assignments and back burner assignments, so to speak, and we'll see where this falls. So very good. Ms. Mokrahasky, you still have the floor.
Okay, that's it. Yeah.
All right, then we are moving rapidly toward the end of the agenda. I see no more business for today. We have no executive session, and Ms. Jones or anyone else, any other business for today's agenda? A reminder that we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for a presentation and discussion on the strategic plan, followed by much look forward to Affordable Housing Action Plan update. With that, seeing no further business for today's agenda, the board is adjourned.